The Bloodmoon battle lasted 4 days. I know because I counted them afterward, lying on the cold stone floor of my war chamber with my back against the wall, and my wolf locked somewhere behind my ribs where I could not reach him, and he would not reach me. 4 days of fighting in the Kelvrath Pass, in the red-lit dark that comes when the Bloodmoon hangs full and low, and the world smells like iron. 4 days, and when it was over I walked back through the hold gates with 31 men fewer than I had taken out. 31 wolves gone quiet in the pass. 31 names I had known since they were boys, running barefoot through the training yard, tracking mud across the great hall flagstones, stealing bread from the kitchen fires. I did not sleep the first night. I sat in the war chamber and I set each name down on parchment in my own hand because someone had to, and I could not ask another man to carry that weight. The candles burned low. My second rail came to the door twice, and I heard him breathing on the other side and did not speak, and after a long time he went away. My wolf did not stir. That was the thing that frightened me more than the grief. The silence inside me where my wolf had always lived, restless and warm and certain. He was not gone. I could feel the weight of him, still and cold as a stone dropped to the bottom of a winter river. He had gone somewhere I could not follow. By the 3rd day, the healers started coming. Kelvrath had 3 pack healers of standing, all of them trained in the old way, all of them respected and competent, and none of them able to reach me. I do not say that as a cruelty. They tried. Healer Corvin was the bravest. He sat outside my door for the better part of a morning and spoke in a low voice about grief and the body and the way a wolf mind seals itself after catastrophic loss, and how this was known, and there was a path through it. I listened to his voice through the wood and felt nothing move inside me. He had good words. They found no purchase. When he finally left, I heard his footsteps retreating down the corridor, and I pressed my forehead against the door and breathed and tried to find my wolf, and found only that same cold, still weight. The council came on the 4th day. Not to the door. They convened in the hall below, and Rael brought me their words, standing in the doorway with his hands clasped in front of him, choosing the phrasing carefully, the way a man does when he is about to say something that frightens him. They are concerned, Rael said, about the hold, about what happens if he started again, about succession, about the wolves. The pack can feel something is wrong with you, my king, and when a pack feels something wrong with their alpha. I know what happens, I said. He was quiet for a moment. What should I tell them? Tell them I am aware of the situation. That was on the 4th day. By the 7th, Rael came again, and this time he did not preface it. He stood in the doorway. I had unlocked it by then, because refusing to eat required a certain coordination with the kitchen staff, and he said, "There is a healer arrived at the outer gate, not ours, traveling. She has been working the northern field camps since before the battle, treating the wounded who couldn't make it back to their packs. She heard about the hold. She came on her own." I said nothing. "She has no pack mark," Rael said carefully. "No affiliation seal. The gate guard called her a half-blood, but I don't know that that's accurate. She looked full wolf to me, just untethered. No bond mark either. Travels alone." "Send her away." There was a pause. "She says she won't go." I looked up at him for the first time in 3 days, and I watched him resist the urge to step back. I know what I looked like by then. I had not shaved since before the battle, and my eyes had that particular quality that my wolf gives them when he is locked and in pain, a flat gray look, like ice before it cracks. "She said what?" "That she would wait," Rael said. Her words were, he paused, remembering, "I have nowhere I need to be before you're better. I can wait." He let that settle. "The gate guard isn't sure what to do with her. She's not threatening. She's just sitting." I closed my eyes. Outside the high, narrow window of the war chamber, the sky had gone the color of pale pewter, the particular Kelvrath winter color that means snow by nightfall. I thought about a woman sitting at my gate with nowhere she needed to be, and something in my chest shifted. Not my wolf. Not yet. Just something adjacent to him. something that had been perfectly motionless for 9 days and now stirred barely, the way a sleeper shifts without waking. "Let her wait," I said, because I did not know what else to say. She waited 2 more days. I know because Rael told me. He checked on her morning and evening with a precision that I recognized as his particular form of devotion. He did not ask me again if I wanted to see her, but he kept me informed of her presence the way a man tracks a small fire in the dark, watching to see if it will spread or go out. She had been given a room in the outer healer's quarters, just inside the hold walls. She ate in the common hall, quietly, alone, and did not introduce herself to anyone. She walked the asphalt healing grounds in the early mornings, which were the grounds maintained just outside the hold walls where the field healers set up their stations during and after a battle. She had apparently gone out there the morning after she arrived and spent 4 hours moving through the space, checking what remained of the field stations, resetting the herb-drying frames someone had knocked loose in the wind. She fixed the frames, Rael said, on the evening of her second day. He said it the way a man says something that is larger than it sounds. I was sitting in the war chamber again with the parchment list in front of me, 31 names. I had been writing letters to the families. It was slow work. There is no formula for it, and anyone who tells you there is has never done it. Did she? I said. She also recatalogued the remaining field supplies. No one asked her to. I looked at the letter in front of me. The boy's name had been Ren. He had been 22 and had a mother in the valley lowlands who kept a small farm and chickens. I had met her once, years ago, when Ren first came to train. She had made me tea and been very gracious about the fact that her son had decided to pledge to the war guard and not stay to help with the farm. "What does she want?" I said. "She hasn't said she wants anything," Rael told me. "The gate guard asked her twice. She said she heard there was a king who needed help and that she was a healer and so she came. That was all. She said nothing else. She did not petition the council. She did not send letters up to my chamber. She did not try to come to me again. She simply stayed. On the 9th day I sent for her. I don't know what made it the 9th day and not the 8th or the 10th. I was sitting in the war chamber in the early dark, the candles down to stubs, the list of names in my hands, and something inside me shifted again, that same movement from a few days ago, but deeper this time. And this time my wolf moved with it, just barely, just enough that I felt the cold stone weight of him shift position like a man turning in sleep. He did not wake, but he turned. I called for Rael through the door. "Bring her," I said. There was a pause. Now. Another pause. "It's the 3rd hour past midnight." "I know what hour it is, Rael." He went. I heard his footsteps going quickly down the corridor, then nothing for a long time, then 2 sets of footsteps returning, his, quick and familiar, and another set, quieter, unhurried. The kind of footsteps that do not announce themselves. They stopped outside my door and Rael knocked once, the way he does when he is presenting someone, and I said come in and the door opened. She was smaller than I expected. That is not a meaningful observation. I am a large man, and most people are smaller than I expect, but there was something particular about her scale that I noticed. She was slight in the way that people are when they have been moving for a long time and have learned to carry only what they absolutely need. Not thin from want, but pared down from motion. She had a healer's bag over her shoulder, worn leather, the clasp replaced at some point with a length of cord tied in a careful knot. Her hair was dark and pulled back from her face without ceremony. Her eyes, when she looked at me across the dim war chamber, were steady. Not steady in the way that means afraid but performing calm. Steady in the way that means she had simply already decided that whatever she found in this room, she was prepared for it. "I'll be outside," Rael said and closed the door. She did not move from just inside the doorway. She looked at me properly, the way the healers before her had looked, cataloging my posture, my pallor, the state of my eyes, the 9 days of nothing written in my face. I watched her do it and felt nothing defensive about it. There was something in her assessment that was not clinical and not afraid. It was thorough, patient. "You can sit," I said, because she was still standing. "I know," she said. "I'm looking at you first." I said nothing. She looked for another moment and then she crossed the room and sat down, not at the table. Not in the chair across from me that was positioned for council meetings or for receiving petitions. She sat on the floor, against the wall, near the small iron brazier that Rail kept lit because he had noticed I stopped shivering near it. She sat with her knees drawn up loosely and her healer's bag in her lap, and she looked at the brazier. "My name is Marin," she said. "I know," I said. "Rail told me." "He told me yours, too," she said. "But I knew it already. You're the Alpha King of Kelvrath. Most people in the Northern Territories know your name." "Is that why you came?" She thought about this, or maybe she was just quiet for its own sake. I couldn't tell yet, couldn't read the rhythm of her silences. "Partly," she said. "I'd heard about the battle." "About the 31, she paused. "About how long you'd been like this." She didn't say it with judgment, just precision. And I've seen this before," she said simply. "Not often, but I've seen it. A wolf going still after catastrophic loss. Usually what happens is everyone around the alpha gets frightened and starts doing things, bringing more healers, making more noise, putting more pressure on the wound. And usually that makes it worse." I looked at her. "What did you do instead?" "I sat outside your gate for 2 days and didn't do anything," she said. There was a sound somewhere in the room that I did not immediately identify. After a moment I realized it had come from me, not quite a laugh, not quite its opposite, something between the two. "Healer Corvin," I said, "spoke to me for 4 hours through my door." "I heard," she said. "He's a good healer. I looked at the supplies he maintains, very thorough." She was quiet for a moment. "Some wounds don't want words." My wolf stirred. Not much. Just that same underwater shift, like a large creature turning in a dark current. I pressed my back harder against the wall I was sitting against and let it happen, did not chase it, did not recoil from it. "What do you think mine wants?" I asked. She looked at me, and in the low firelight from the brazier her eyes were very dark and very calm. "I don't know yet," she said. "That's why I'm here. I'm not going to tell you what you need. I'm going to sit here until I figure out what you need, and then I'm going to help with that." She paused. "If that's acceptable." "And if I told you to leave?" "Then I'd leave," she said without hesitation. "You're the king. I'm a healer with no affiliation. You can send me away at any time." She met my eyes. "But you sent for me at 3 in the morning, so I think you probably don't want to send me away." The war chamber was quiet. The brazier made its small sounds. Outside the narrow window the sky had the kind of deep winter darkness that comes just before snow, a particular quality of black that seems to absorb all the light around it. I said, "Why are you unaffiliated?" She was quiet for a moment. "Because I choose to be." "That's a cost," I said. "No pack protection, no bond." "You travel alone." "Yes," she said. "Why is it worth it?" She looked at the brazier again. "Because every pack I've been to, there's always someone who needs a healer and not enough healers to go around. If I stay with one pack, I help that pack and no one else. If I travel," she made a small motion with her hand that was not quite a shrug. "I helped the field camps after your battle before I came here. Wolves who couldn't make it home. Some of them would have lost limbs. One of them would have died." She said it plainly, without flourish. "I'd rather be useful broadly than comfortable in one place." I looked at her for a long time. She let me look. "You have no bond mark," I said. "No," she said. "You've never been claimed." "No. And you're not looking to be." She was quiet for a moment. "I didn't say that," she said carefully. "I said I'm unaffiliated. That's different." The thing that happened next I cannot explain with the vocabulary I had before that night. My wolf moved. Not the way he had been moving those small, cold underwater shifts, a creature in sleep. He moved the way he does when something significant has happened, a surge upward toward the surface, toward my sternum like a man standing from his knees. He did not break through. He was still locked, still fractured and cold from the battle and the 9 days of silence. But he stood. He stood and turned, and the direction he turned was toward her. I kept my face still. I do not know if I succeeded. Marin reached into her healer's bag and brought out a small jar of something. She did not look at me while she did it. She looked at the jar, opened it, checked the contents, closed it again. The smell that reached me was pine resin and something else, something I didn't have a name for, something green and faintly cool. "What is that?" I said. "Ashbark compound," she said. "For the lungs. The air in this room has been closed for 9 days and your breathing is too shallow." She set the jar down near the brazier, just inside the warmth, to let the smell release. She did not ask my permission. She did not hand it to me. She simply placed it where it would do the most good and then set her bag aside and folded her hands in her lap and looked at the fire again. It was the most naturally authoritative thing I had seen anyone do in 9 days. We sat in silence for a long time. I do not know exactly how long, an hour, perhaps more. The candles burned lower. The brazier settled. The ashbark compound released its smell into the room in a slow, quiet way, and I noticed after a while that my chest had opened somewhat, that I was breathing differently. I did not mention this. At some point Marin asked, without looking at me, which one was hardest to write. I looked at the list of names on the table above us. I had not told her about the letters. She had simply seen them, or seen the parchment, or guessed from the state of the room. "The youngest," I said after a pause. She nodded, did not ask more. "He was 22, I said, and then found that I had kept talking, which I had not intended to do. "He came to me when he was 16. His mother made me tea. She had a farm in the lowlands, chickens. He was quick. The quickest in the yard for 3 years running, until the Harrow twins joined the guard and gave him competition, which he considered the best thing that had ever happened to him." I stopped. The war chamber was very quiet. "I haven't finished his letter," I said. "What does it need?" Marin asked. "I don't know," I said. "Everything I write sounds like a report." She was quiet for a moment. "What was his name?" "Ren," I said. She let the name sit in the air, did not fill the space around it. "Tell me one thing about him," she said. "That wouldn't go in a report." I thought about Ren. About 16 years old and all speed and no patience, and the way he had eventually, slowly, learned to be still when the moment asked for it. About the time he had found an injured raven in the training yard, and spent 3 weeks feeding it strips of meat from his own meals until it could fly again. And about the way he had tried to do this secretly and failed completely, because the raven had imprinted on him and followed him around the yard for the full 3 weeks, and everyone had known exactly what he was doing. "He kept a raven," I said. "Not deliberately. He healed it and it decided he was its person." Marin made a small sound, not quite a laugh, something warm and precise. "That could go in the letter," she said. I looked at the parchment, and then, for the first time in 9 days, I picked up the pen. I did not write the letter that night. What I did was write one line, just one, at the bottom of the unfinished parchment, not polished, not measured, not the language of a war report. Just the raven. Just that one fact about Ren that his mother would not know if I did not tell her. And something inside me, some seal I had not known I had made, cracked slightly open. I did not cry. I want to be accurate about this. I did not cry, and I do not think what happened in that chamber required tears to be real. What happened was smaller and more essential than tears. The cold stone weight that had been my wolf for 9 days shifted, and for just a moment, just an instant, I felt him. Felt the warm, live animal weight of him. The creature I had carried since I was 12 years old and ran my first shift under the Bloodmoon with my father's pack circling me. Felt him the way you feel your own heartbeat when you've been holding still so long you stopped noticing it. He was there, he was still there. Marin did not comment on the pen or the parchment or the line I had written. She had her eyes on the brazier and her face was composed, and she was simply present the way she had been present since she sat down, without agenda, without performance, with the particular quality of attention that I could only describe as, she was not waiting for me to be better. She was just there in the room, while I was exactly as I was. I cannot tell you how rare that is. I am a king. Every person who enters my presence wants something from me or wants something from me or is performing the wanting or performing the not wanting. My wolf has always known the difference, and for 9 days he had been unable to read any of it and had simply shut it all out. But he was reading her. Even locked and cold and still, he was reading her, and what he was finding was nothing alarming. Nothing that needed guarding against. Someone who was simply sitting in the room. She stayed until the candles went out. Then she reached into her bag and brought out a small covered lamp of the kind field healers carry, flint-lit, warm and low. She did not ask if I wanted it. She set it on the floor between us, and it made its small circle of warmth in the dark, and we sat inside it. "You should try to sleep," she said eventually. "I don't sleep," I said. "Since the battle." "Before, I sleep badly in general." I paused. "I sleep better in the field, which is counterintuitive," she said without irony. "Yes." "Does your wolf settle better when there's something to track?" I thought about this. "Yes." "Then you might try giving him something to track." She reached into her bag again, and this time what she brought out was a length of dark cord, wound around a small smooth weight, a carved piece of what looked like ashwood, nothing ornate, the kind of thing made quickly with a belt knife by someone with a little skill and a lot of patience. She set it on the floor between us. "It's something I make for wolves who have trouble settling," she said. "You hold the cord and let the weight swing. Something in the tracking instinct catches on it. I know it sounds like something for a pup," I said. "Yes," she agreed without embarrassment. "It works for pups because it works for wolves. The mechanism is the same." I looked at the small weight on the floor. A king of Kelvrath, sitting in the dark with a traveling healer, being offered a pup's sleeping aid. 9 days ago I would have known exactly what to feel about that. Tonight I did not know what I felt about anything, and so I picked up the cord and held the weight and let it move. My wolf, the cold still thing in my chest, tracked it. Barely. But he tracked it. His attention moved with the small arc of the carved wood, back and forth, the way a predator's eye moves before the predator has decided whether it's interested. "Tell me about the Ashfeld grounds," I said, because talking seemed better than sitting in silence while my wolf tracked a piece of wood in the dark. "What was the state of the field stations?" She told me. She told me in the same way she'd sat at my gate and fixed the drying frames, practically, specifically, without embellishment. The number of stations, the state of the supply stores, which herbs had been used and which had spoiled in the cold, which structures had held up in the wind and which needed re-anchoring. She knew all of it with the precision of someone who has cataloged disaster many times and has learned that the cataloging is itself a form of steadiness. I listened, and my wolf listened too. And at some point in the accounting, I leaned my head back against the stone wall and closed my eyes, not to sleep, just because the darkness behind my own eyelids was less heavy than it had been for 9 days, and I did not open them again. I do not know when I fell asleep. I know that when I did, my wolf came with me for the first time since the battle, not warm, not whole, not what he had been, but there, present, like a wound that has stopped bleeding and become simply a wound, still real, still painful, but no longer catastrophic. When I woke, it was close to dawn. The small lamp was still burning, very low. Marin was sitting where she had been sitting, awake, her hands folded in her lap. She had not left. She had not moved to a chair or to a more comfortable position. She was simply still there, the way she had been, and something about that, the unchanging fact of her presence in the exact same position as when I had fallen asleep, hit me with a force I was not prepared for. My wolf surged. Not locked, not cold. Surging upward through my chest, fully awake, more awake than he had been in 9 days, and the direction of the surge was unambiguous. He went toward her the way a river goes toward lower ground. Not a choice. A fact. I said nothing. I stayed very still and tried to understand what was happening to me. She must have felt the change in the room, because she turned to look at me. And in the dawn-gray light from the window, her face was calm, and her eyes were dark, and I was looking at someone I did not know, had never met before 3 hours ago. And my wolf was behaving as though he had known her his entire life and simply been separated from her by some administrative error that was now being corrected. "You slept," she said. "Yes," I said. "Good." She looked at me for a moment. "How do you feel?" I considered this. "Different," I said, because it was true and because I did not have another word for it. She nodded, as though different was a satisfactory clinical report. She began to gather her bag, which meant she was preparing to leave, which my wolf did not want at all in any measure, and I became aware that my hand had moved slightly toward her, not dramatically, not reaching, just a small involuntary adjustment of position in her direction, the kind of thing that would be invisible to most people. She noticed. Her gaze dropped to my hand and then came back to my face, and she was very still for a moment. "Aldrich," she said, my name plainly without title. No one had called me that without title in 9 days. No one had called me that without title since my father died. "Yes," I said. "Is your wolf—" She stopped, started again carefully. "Is something happening?" "I don't know," I said, which was not true. I knew. I simply did not know what to do with the knowing. "I've been isolated," I said, "for 9 days. It may be." "It may be," she said, and her voice had a careful quality, "that it's just proximity, that your wolf is looking for something to attach to because he's been alone." She met my eyes. "I'm not going to misread that." "I'm not asking you to read it at all," I said. "I know," she said. "I'm telling you what I'm doing, which is what I said I'd do. I'm trying to be clear with you." I looked at her. The dawn light was growing. In it I could see her properly, the details that candlelight flattens. The small scar on her jaw from something old and healed over, the calluses on her hands from years of the healer's bag and the field kit, and the cord of pup-settling weights, the steadiness in her face that was not performance. "What would it mean," I said, "if it wasn't just proximity?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I think you know what it would mean," she said carefully. "Say it." Another pause. "A faded bond is not something I can diagnose from one night in a room," she said. "It's also not something I'm going to dismiss. If your wolf is reaching toward me, really reaching, not just looking for warmth, then that's significant, and I would treat it as significant." She looked at her hands for a moment. "But I don't know what I feel yet. I've been here 1 night." "What do you feel now?" She looked up at me again, and something in her composure shifted, just slightly, not cracking, just becoming more honest. "Like I don't want to go back to the healer's quarters," she said. "Which is—" She stopped. "New," I said. "Yes," she said. We looked at each other in the early dawn light of the war chamber, and my wolf stood fully upright in my chest and did not move, watching her with the whole of his attention, and I understood that whatever else happened, something had changed in the last 3 hours that was not going to unchange. 9 days of silence broken by a woman who had sat at my gate for 2 days and then sat beside me in the dark and not left. My wolf going from locked and cold and still to here, completely, undeniably here. "I'm going to ask you to stay," I said. "Not in this room, properly in the hold, as long as you like." She looked at me. "That's an unusual invitation." "I'm aware. You've known me for 4 hours. 3, I said. "I was asleep for one of them." Something moved in her face, something that was trying not to become a smile and not entirely succeeding. "I don't want to be kept," she said. "I'm not. I travel. It's who I am." "I'm not asking you to stop traveling," I said. "I'm asking you not to go back to the healer's quarters this morning and say goodbye to the gate guard." I paused. There are 30 letters that need finishing, I said, and the Ashfeld grounds apparently need work. And I stopped, started again. I would like you to still be here tomorrow. She looked at me for a long time. Then she set her healer's bag back down on the floor. All right, she said, tomorrow. The days that followed were not a romance in the sense that word suggests, quick and luminous and full of declarations. They were something slower and more durable than that. Marin moved back into the healer's quarters properly and she worked. She worked the way she had in the field camps, thoroughly, without announcement, at whatever needed doing. She finished the recataloguing of the Ashfeld grounds. She began running what she called a skills assessment of the hold's 3-pack healers, which they found slightly alarming and then found useful. She ate in the common hall and was quiet and consistent, and after about 4 days the hold's wolves, who had been unsettled and watchful since the battle, began to settle around her the way animals settle around a thing that is not threatening. Not adoring her, not performing, just relaxing, the way a room does when a cold draft is stopped. I watched this from a distance at first. Then I watched it less from a distance. Then I stopped watching from a distance at all, which happened naturally, without my deciding it, the way things happen when the decision has already been made at a level below conscious thought. We worked on the letters together. She would sit at the other end of the table with the Ashfeld inventory or with a healer's record and I would write, and sometimes I would read her a line and she would say keep it, or she would say more about that, and I would say more about that, and the letters got finished. All 31 of them. They were not perfect. They were not the language of reports. They were the language of a man who had known 31 wolves for years and was trying to tell their families one true thing about each of them. My wolf was not subtle about Marin. He never had been from that first night, from the moment he surged upward toward her in the gray dawn and hadn't come back down. He tracked her movements in the hold the way he tracks weather. Not anxiously, not obsessively, but with the steady low-level awareness of a creature that has filed something away as relevant to its survival. When she was in the room, he was calm. When she left the room, he remained calm but oriented, the way a compass needle holds toward north even when you're not watching it. I did not tell her this at first. She was careful with me, careful in the way she had promised to be, honest about what she knew and what she didn't, not performing warmth and not withholding it. She came to the war chamber evenings now without being sent for. We did not talk about what my wolf was doing. We talked about other things. The hold, the Ashfeld grounds, the field camps she had worked, the northern territories, the history of the Bloodmoon battle and the terrain of the pass and what might be done differently. She had opinions. Considered ones, informed ones, which she offered with the same directness she offered everything else. Rael noticed. He noticed the way that people who have watched a king for years notice everything, carefully, and without comment, except for one morning when he appeared in my doorway with a report from the outer guard, and then stood there an extra moment after delivering it with an expression that I had learned over 17 years of knowing him means, he is going to say something he has been sitting on for some time. Yes, I said before he spoke. I haven't said anything, he said. You haven't had to, I said. He was quiet for a moment. She's good for the hold, he said finally, which was Rael's way of saying she's good for you, which was Rael's way of saying whatever is happening, I'm not opposing it. Yes, I said. The council will want to know your intentions, he said, at some point. I'm aware, I said. He nodded and went away, which was also Rael's way of saying I'll hold them off as long as I can. It was 12 days after that first night when the thing I had been feeling and not naming happened in a way that removed all possibility of not naming it. We had been working in the war chamber, later than usual. The Ashfeld grounds project had run into a complication with the supply route from the valley and Marin had spread maps across the table, and we had been working through the routing problem with the kind of focused practicality that I had come to understand was one of her primary modes. She was very good at supply routing. She had been navigating supply constraints in field camps for years and had a precise, lateral mind for logistical problems that I found, unexpectedly, one of the most engaging things I had ever encountered in another person. It was late and the candles were low, and she said, "This route won't work in spring thaw, the lower road floods." And I leaned across the table to look at the map she was pointing at, and my hand landed near hers, not touching, just close, and my wolf, the wolf who had been surging toward her since the gray dawn 12 days ago and not retreating, simply stopped waiting. It was not dramatic. There was no sound, no visible light, no spectacular event. What happened was warmth, a warmth that started in my wrist, specifically my left wrist, and spread upward through my arm with the quality of something that had been waiting a long time to be allowed to move. I felt my wolf in it, fully, not locked, not cold, not fractured. Whole, the way he had been before the battle. Warm and alive and certain, and the certainty was not uncertain at all. This woman, this one, already. I looked at my wrist. The mate mark was there. Not gradual, not beginning and building. It was simply there, the way things are after they've always been true. A mark on the inside of my left wrist, dark and clean. The shape that is different for every pair. The shape that means you are recognized by something older than your will. Marin had gone still. I looked up at her and she was looking at her own left wrist, and the mark was there too on her, identical in shape to mine. Simultaneously, not one before the other. She looked up at me, and her eyes were very wide, and for the first time in all the nights and days I had known her, her composure was gone, not broken, not frightened, just gone. She looked the way someone looks when something happens that they had been careful not to believe in. "Oh," she said, very quietly. "Yes," I said. We were both very still for a moment. She stopped. "I came here to help," she said. "I didn't come here for," she gestured slightly at her wrist. "I know," I said. "I don't want you to think I was." "Marin," I said, "I know." I looked at her for a moment. The map was still spread between us on the table, the supply routes half resolved, the spring thaw problem not yet solved. The candles were very low. The brazier was warm. "I've known for 12 days," I said. "My wolf has known since the first night." I didn't say anything because I thought about how to finish that sentence. "Because you said you didn't know what you felt, and I was not going to tell you what you felt." She looked at me. Her face was very careful, very honest. "What do you feel?" she asked. I thought about 9 days of silence and 31 names on parchment, and a woman who sat at my gate for 2 days, and then sat beside me in the dark, and did not leave and spoke to me about ravens like it was the most natural thing in the world. I thought about the Ashbark compound, and the cord with the carved wood weight, and the map of the Ashfeld grounds and late evenings working through supply problems, and the way she said keep it or say more about that. "Certain," I said, "which is not something I've been recently." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I've been trying to be responsible about this, since the first night, because you were in a vulnerable state and I was your healer, and it would have been wrong of me to read something into it." "I know," I said. "And I wasn't sure what I felt," she said. "I kept not being sure. I kept being almost sure and then telling myself to wait." She looked at her wrist again. "But I think I've been sure for about 10 days, she said, with the precision of someone being very accurate at her own expense. Something warm happened in my chest. My wolf, settled and whole, turned toward her with the ease of something that has found its direction and will not be confused about it again. "Then we've both been quite responsible," I said. She looked at me, and this time the smile did not almost happen. It happened entirely, and it transformed her face in a way that I had not seen before, a way that made me understand that her usual composure, that steadiness I had been reading for days, was real, but that this was also real. This warmth, this slight embarrassed brightness, this woman who had traveled alone through the northern territories for years treating wounds in field camps, and had arrived at my gate with nowhere she needed to be, and was now looking at a mate mark on her wrist with an expression that said she had not been planning for this, and had somehow, in some chamber she had not examined too closely, been hoping for it anyway. "What happens now?" she asked. "Whatever you want," I said. "We go slowly if you want to go slowly. We stay as we are for as long as you need. There is no ceremony I will ask you to stand through before you're ready, no claim I'll make before you make it with me." I met her eyes. "I am the Alpha King of Kelvrath, and I have been waiting for a fated mate since I was 18 years old and received my wolf, and felt the first understanding of what the mate mark would mean. I can wait as long as you need." She looked at me for a long time. "I've been alone for a long time," she said. "Not unhappily, but alone." "I know," I said. I don't know how to do this." "Neither do I said. "I've never had a mate either." I paused. "I suspect we'll work it out in the same way we worked out the supply routing problem. With maps and argument and occasional impasse, and eventually a solution." She made the small sound again, the not quite laugh that I had first heard in the war chamber on the first night, that I had already begun to collect like something I wanted to have more of. "That's a very practical approach to a destined bond," she said. "I'm a practical man." "You are not," she said, with unexpected certainty. I looked at her. "No. A practical man would have told me about his wolf 12 days ago," she said. "You didn't tell me because you were being careful with me, which is," she paused, "which is not practical, it's considerate." I looked at my wrist and her wrist, and the marks that had simply appeared, waiting for something that was already true to stop being argued with. "Stay," I said. "Not in the healer's quarters, here. In the hold properly. I'm not asking you to stop being a healer or to stop traveling if travel is what you need. I'm asking you to have a place to come back to." She was quiet for a long moment. I let the quiet be what it needed to be. Outside, the hold was settling into deep night. I could hear the distant sound of the gate watch changing shift, the particular quiet that Kelvrath makes in the small hours when the wolves are easy. My wolf was easy. He was the easiest he had been in longer than 9 days, longer than the battle, I thought. Something about the marking, about the recognition made visible, had settled him in a way that even the good days before the battle had not quite managed. "All right," Marin said. The same word she had said on the first morning. "Yes." I had not intended to go to the council the next morning. But Rael had heard something, perhaps from the change in the hold's mood, which is the thing about wolves. The alpha state diffuses through a pack whether he intends it to or not, and I had gone to bed the night before feeling like a man who has come back from somewhere and found everything still here, and the hold had felt it. By the time the dawn light came through the narrow war chamber windows, and Marin had gone back to the healer's quarters to gather her things for the move, Rael was at my door with an expression that said the council had convened without being summoned and was waiting. I went. The council chamber was a large gray room that smelled of old wood and tallow candles, and there were 7 of them around the long table. Garrison Commander Brecht sat at one end, the man who had been managing the hold's security in my absence and managing, I was told, his own anxiety about the state of his alpha with the particular form of control that involves holding himself very straight and making very organized lists. Beside him was Counselor Thane, who handled the hold's external relations and who I had always found reliable in a crisis. And beside Thane were the others, the Treasury Warden, the Record Keeper, the 2 land councillors, and old Edric, who had been on the council since my father's time and who I generally trusted more than the rest of them combined. They all looked at me, and I realized, standing in the doorway, that several of them were looking at my wrist. The mate mark on my left wrist was there, clear in the gray morning light, unmistakable to anyone who knew what it was, and everyone in this room knew what it was. Every wolf knows a mate mark. They had been looking for it for years. They had been not quite asking me about it since I was 18 and ascended to the throne, and the hold's future had begun to rest on the question of succession. Brecht's expression shifted. I watched several things move through it in rapid succession. Surprise, reassessment, something that began as objection, and then encountered whatever he was seeing in my face and reconsidered. "My king," he said. "She is my fated mate," I said before anyone else could speak. I said it plainly, the way Marin said things, practically, precisely, without embellishment, as a statement of fact. "The bond is marked, her wrist and mine simultaneously last night." I looked at each of them in turn. "She is a healer. She has no pack affiliation. She is a half-blood by some people's measure, though I'll want that looked into properly. There is more to her than that, and I intend to find out exactly what her bloodline is." I paused. "She will take the position of my Luna when she is ready to do so, on her own terms, in her own time. She came here to help the hold, and she has helped the hold. She has helped me more than anyone else in the last 9 days has managed, and I am not going to pretend otherwise." I met Brecht's eyes. "If there are objections, I want to hear them now." There was a long silence. The kind of silence that a room of 7 people makes when they are all rapidly revising a position they had been holding for some time. Brecht looked at the mark on my wrist for another moment. Then he did something I had not expected. He exhaled slowly, and his shoulders dropped slightly, the way shoulders drop when a man has been holding something and is permitted to put it down. "The bond is marked," he said. It was not a question. "Yes," I said. He looked at Edric. Edric, who had said nothing yet, was looking at me with an expression I could not fully read, something old in it, something that looked like recognition. "There was a healer woman in your grandfather's time," Edric said, not to anyone in particular, just to the room, "unaffiliated. Your grandfather's wolf chose her the same way. The council of the time had objections." He was quiet for a moment. "The bond was marked and the objections became irrelevant." He looked at me. "Is she kind?" I thought about ravens, about ashbark compound set near the fire to warm, permission not asked, about a woman sitting at a gate for 2 days because she said she had nowhere she needed to be before I was better, about supply routes and late candles, and say more about that. "Yes," I said. Edric nodded. "Then there's nothing to discuss," he said to the room, and then carefully and without ceremony he stood from his chair and bowed. It was not a bow of obligation. It was a bow of a man who has been waiting a long time for something and is making peace with the wait being over. The others followed, not all of them immediately, not all of them with equal grace, but they followed. Brecht last, which was Brecht's way, and I did not resent it. He was a careful man, and careful men need a moment to make their reckoning. I brought Marin before the pack 3 mornings after that. Not a ceremony. She was not ready for ceremony, and I had told her there would be none until she was. What I did was bring her to the morning assembly, which the hold held in the great yard regardless of weather, a tradition since my great-grandfather's time. The alpha stands with the pack at dawn, and the pack sees that the alpha stands. It is a simple ritual. It means we are still here. She stood beside me in the gray morning light with her healer's bag over her shoulder. She had kept the bag because she was a healer and it was part of her, and I had told her I would not ask her to set it aside, and I said nothing formal. I simply stood beside her, and my wolf stood fully present in my chest, visible the way a wolf's state is always visible to a pack, and the pack felt it. The quiet that went through the yard was not the alarmed quiet of the 9 days. It was a different quality of silence. And then the pack bowed, not commanded, not performed, the way they bow when something true has been shown to them and they recognize it. Marin stood beside me and was very still, and I glanced at her and saw that her eyes were bright, not tears, or not only tears, something more complex than that, something that looked like a woman who has been moving for a long time and is beginning, carefully, to believe she has found a place to stop. I did not claim her with words at that assembly. The mate mark did that work already. Any wolf could see it on both our wrists. What I did was simply stand beside her, and let the pack see us standing together, and let my wolf certainty speak the way a wolf certainty always speaks, not in declarations but in presence. There was, in the weeks that followed, the administrative work of what we were. Rail organized it with his usual thoroughness. The council had objections about her bloodline, which I had promised to look into, and which Marin had a complicated relationship with. Her family history was not something she talked about easily, and I did not press. And what we eventually found, carefully and over time, was that her mother's line was full wolf, and her father's line was something the old records called moon-touched, which was a different thing from half-blood, and a thing that explained certain things about her, including the particular quality of her presence around wolves in pain, and the reason my wolf had surged toward her in the dawn light like a river toward lower ground. She began to travel again, after a time. That had been the agreement, and I had meant it. She went out to the field camps in the spring and came back. She went south in the summer to work a pack that was dealing with a sickness in the young wolves and came back. She always came back, which she had not always done for anywhere before, and which I did not take for granted, not once. I had learned something in the 9 days of silence, and the 3 hours in the dark war chamber, about what it means to let someone be what they are without trying to change the shape of them, to fit a space you've already decided they should fill. She taught me the rest of it, over time, in the way she taught me everything, without announcement, by simply being what she was in the room with me. The hold healed. Slowly, the way things heal that were seriously damaged, not back to what they were before, but forward into what they become after. I finished the 31 letters, sent them, received in time 31 replies, some of them brief, some of them long, some of them just a few words from a mother or a wife or a brother who did not have more than that. The one from Wren's mother was a page and a half about the raven, which had stayed after Wren was gone and had apparently transferred its affiliation to Wren's mother's farm and was, as of the letter's writing, actively bullying the chickens. She thought Wren would have found this extremely satisfying. I read this to Marin in the war chamber over the remains of a late supper, and she made that sound again, the warm, precise sound that was not quite a laugh, in which I had been collecting since the first night, and which I would, I thought, collect for the rest of my life. The hold was quiet around us. The Bloodmoon season was over. My wolf was settled and warm and fully present, had been for months now, and I carried him the way I had always carried him before, as a companion, as a familiar weight, as the part of myself that knew things before I could name them. He had known first. Before I understood what was happening, before I named it, before the mark appeared on our wrists in the low candlelight over a map of supply routes. He had turned toward her in the gray dawn and not come back, and he had been right, and I had learned, again, what I first learned when I was 12 years old and ran my first shift and felt the warm live animal weight of him for the first time, that the wolf knows. The wolf knows, and it is worth learning to trust him. Marin set down her cup and looked at me across the table, and her face was what it always was, steady and honest, and occasionally, now, quietly warm in a way that was no longer carefully managed. And I thought about a woman at my gate with nowhere she needed to be, sitting in the cold, patient as weather, waiting for something she had not let herself believe in. I was glad every day that I had sent for her on the 9th day and not the 10th.